Hi, I'm Jeanette Peterson, writer and mindfulness coach. Welcome to the Art of Mindful Disruption, where I share conversations to help relax, motivate, ponder, and inspire you to grow. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this mindfulness meander with me as I traverse some topics that might just make you think very differently about pretty much everything in life. Over time, I will challenge your way of thinking and also your emotions in ways that you may never have considered possible before. You see, mindful disruption is not about chasing solutions. It's more about building the awareness and allowing those solutions to find you. So before we start, let's take some long, slow breaths, just so we can really relax into our breathing, relax into our body, become present, because we know that when we become present, we become much more aware of our surroundings and much more aware of our feelings and engage in the space that we're in. So just take some long, deep breaths, just breathing right into that belly space. Breathing in nice and deep and feeling your belly expand. And then as we breathe out through our nose, we're breathing out long and deep, just allowing those breaths to center ourselves and find where we are in this space right now. So let's just take two more long breaths into your belly. Feel that air as it expands within your body. Feel the expansiveness of it, and then just allow it to release naturally as you breathe out through your nose. And one more long breath, long slow breath into your belly. Allow for that expansion, and then just naturally allow it to release and slide away as you breathe back out through your nose. And this breathing technique that we've just done then to enable us to really center and become present is a technique that's useful in pretty much every part of your life. So not just when you're trying to focus on listening to what I'm talking about here today, but when you're trying to focus on anything in life in general, if you feel a little bit scattered and like something's occurred that's kind of taken you away from that space where you're trying to be here now, well, it's a really good exercise for you to do just to bring you back. So now that you're back and we're really aware of where we are presently, I think it's a good idea for us to jump into today's topic. And it's an interesting one, and it's all about opportunity. So opportunity, it knocks in the most unlikely of places. And this is an interesting concept to consider, because opportunity is something that we talk a lot about. We talk about job opportunities, we talk about educational opportunities, we talk about individual pursuits of opportunities in sport, in art, in all the things that we do. So opportunity is very much part of our vocabulary that we use from a very young age in life. And it gets built up, and then often we become very focused on opportunity and what it means, and it can also change our perception of what opportunity really looks like. So let's really start to delve into this topic, and we'll talk about it in some depth. So when we talk about opportunity, what really comes to mind is when you actually see something like disruption. Do you see it as something negative? And when you hear the word opportunity, do you hear it as something positive? Because really, disruption is merely opportunity masked in a way that potentially has created some discomfort in our life. But in circumstances, as we move through our day-to-day life, disruptions can come in really small, unpleasant circumstances, in very tiny ways, but they can also come in really significant ways. And look, we all know that there's a significant disruption that the entire world has had to face in recent times, which is COVID-19. And this is a disruption that is continuing with us right now. And it seems to be a roller coaster ride of disruption, that I would describe it as. But a really interesting way that I have taken to looking at disruption, and I actually recommend that many of my clients do the same thing, is think about the story of the wolf and in Little Red Riding Hood. So Little Red Riding Hood's the nice, she's the good girl, she's looking after the 3 little bears, and she's hopping and skipping through nature one day, and we have part of this story which talks about the wolf. So the wolf is, in some ways chasing down Little Red Riding Hood. But in the circumstance of when we talk about opportunity and disruption, we talk about things like when the wolf's at your door. So disruption could feel very much like that wolf is at your door. It's arrived suddenly without any awareness or opportunity for you to prepare for it. But what happens if the wolf comes dressed as Little Red Riding Hood? You'd probably be even less ready for that disruption, wouldn't you? Because you wouldn't know it was the wolf initially because it was Little Red Riding Hood. But let's face it, disruption is opportunity and opportunity is disruption, but they're just looked at through a different lens. So what if the wolf was merely opportunity but disguised in a disruptive way? So if we learn to apply the lens in a different way, then we can actually see disruption as opportunity rather than seeing it as a bad thing. So it all really comes down to perception, doesn't it? So some people you will probably notice in your life that you see and they just seem to just be able to hop and skip just like Little Red Riding Hood through any disruption. Anything comes to them, they seem to be completely oblivious and nothing affects them. Yet some people, the slightest change in their living space or in their workspace causes huge discomfort to them, and they feel incredibly disrupted by it. And it could be something as simple as just a change to a process, or a change to a person that they're working with, or a location where they have to find something. Now, this kind of discomfort with disruption can happen from a very young age, and it obviously can be caused by imprints. So if you're disrupted at a young age and you have a feeling that's applied to that disruption of discomfort, then you can very much go into life and continue to feel like all of disruption is uncomfortable. And so then you continue to carry that discomfort. Now, there's some really good things that you can do to learn to turn disruption into opportunity just by the way you look at it. But there's a few really key skills that I've utilised myself, and I often teach other people to utilise these 5 key skills themselves. So I'll just talk through naming what these skills are, but then we'll talk about those skills individually and see how potentially you could apply them into those spaces which are opportunity but knocking on the door as disruption. So the first skill is about awareness. Obviously incredibly important, because disruption, if you're more aware, you might actually see it coming. Now, the second skill is about taking time out. So it's about enacting that pause and being able to really stop and take some time to be more prepared in life in general. The third skill is about knowledge. So gaining obviously more knowledge is always a good thing. The fourth skill is about planning, and the fifth skill is about acceptance. So with these 5 skills, we can really transform our lives in the way that we perceive and we deal with disruption. So let's look at the first one. So the first skill is all about awareness. So we know life's full of distractions. It's full of noise. It's full of interference that impact our awareness. So by building your ability to remain aware and remain open to opportunities that present themselves more frequently, opportunity is constantly knocking. But we don't see it because we're being distracted. So there is lots of ways that you can build on awareness. But the first thing, and funnily enough, about awareness is to become aware that you're not aware. And that sounds like a tricky thing to do, right? You're asking me, become aware that I'm not aware. If I'm not aware, how am I going to know that I'm not aware? But this is the process of mindfulness. So the very first step, and a really common conversation that I have with people around mindfulness is they say, okay, meditating, a constant topic that comes up with people. I can't meditate because my mind's busy and it's racing all the time and I don't know how to stop it. But awareness is the first stage of that. Okay, so everything in mindfulness, the first step is awareness. And the first step is becoming aware that your mind is wandering away and that you are being distracted by noises. So when it comes to disruption in your life, being aware of those distractions, you can actually start to put some steps in place to help stop those. It could relate to simple things like being distracted from your general day-to-day at work. So if you're in a noisy space where lots of people are walking past, it's really easy to be distracted in those circumstances, and that can really interfere with our awareness of what's going on. But just by removing yourself from those distractions sometimes is not helpful at all, because then you're trying to create a perfect environment that's still and quiet. And so whenever you're in an environment that's not still and quiet, then you're having difficulties in dealing with that situation. So it's a key about building that awareness and finding that center point. Okay, that point where you know that there's noise around you, but you're able to remove it from your current awareness and let it sink into the background. And where other noises that are coming up in the background, which potentially could be disruption or opportunities that are coming your way, you are able to bring them to the foreground. So you have control about that person that's talking next to you, who's sitting at the desk near you, or if you're a student at school, the student that sits next to you in class, or if you're on the train on the way to work and somebody's talking particularly loud near you, you actually have the ability to tune into that or tune out to it. But it takes awareness first to know all those things that are going on around you. And I mean, there's different ways that we engage our awareness to our senses. Generally, we talk about 5 senses, right? So we talk about the key senses of visual, which we use 80% of the time, hearing, so the things that we can hear, and some people have much more sensitive hearing than others. We obviously have the sense of taste, the sense of smell, and touch. But these are just the first 5. There is scientific evidence that we're aware of more than 30, and there's probably thousands that we just haven't tapped into. So those just being aware on those levels of those 5 senses is the beginning to really opening up awareness and then calling into that space what you want to have in there, and then releasing into that awareness space what you don't want to have there. So it's awareness, it's all within your control, and it's about practicing the awareness. So the first step is about becoming aware of what's going on around you, and becoming aware when you're missing the things that are going on around you. And so you understand and you start to slide along that scale of the things that you're allowing in and the things that maybe you might be missing. And as you play with them and practice those skills of being aware, you can actually learn to pull in the things that you want and just remove the things that you don't quite easily. And I can give a very simple example of how that I do this regularly in my day-to-day life. So I jokingly comment to people all the time, I could meditate on the side of a freeway. And people say, how could you do that? That's ridiculous because it's so noisy. Meditation is about quiet, but meditation is about me quietening what's going on within me. So I can actually sit in a space where it's very, very noisy around me. But this is part of awareness, that I've built up that ability to not allow those noises to intrude with the quiet that I'm creating on the inside. And anybody can build up that skill, but first you build up from the basics, just like anything else new that you learn. You don't sit down the first time you meditate and expect to be a perfect meditator. And what that meditation looks like to you and to the next person that comes along could be completely different, because mindfulness is different for everybody. And it's just like the process of developing your own awareness is your own. right? So number one, working on awareness. And so there's loads and loads of ways that you can really support that function. And then the second skill that I talked about was time out. So it's important to take time out of your day-to-day life so you can spend time and potentially reflect. Look at how your morning went. So at lunchtime, instead of just getting a sandwich and sitting at your desk and continuing to work and write and do all those things, go for a walk and sit in a park and eat your sandwich. Think about how the morning went and think about the disruptions that came and the noises that distracted you and the opportunities that you may have missed because you were absorbed in something else. So just think and reflect about how you feel about these things. So taking time out is really, really important, A, for you to disconnect from your environment, but you can both see two things. So you can reflect on what's occurred in the time before, but you can also then start to look at what's actually going on in the world around you. And if you sit in a park that maybe you've never seen in before, or you've never sat in before, that you will actually see things that you've never seen before. And you might find this odd, but there's some really simple things that you can do to test that. So you can go and sit in a space and you can look for 5 things that you didn't see the day before. And the next day you can go and sit in the same space and look for 5 things you didn't see the day before. And I can tell you, you can go there for a week and find things. There's a building you could pass, or you could walk the same way from the train to work or from home to school or on your daily walk where you take your dog. And I guarantee when you start to build awareness and you take time out away from your busy day-to-day life, you start to recognize things in your space that have always been there, like the sign that you pass and you say, I've never seen that sign before, but I've walked this path hundreds of times. And this is exactly the same as opportunity. So when we take time out and we utilize this skill of being observant in our every day-to-day life, we start to see the things we missed and we start to recognize the things that we've focused on and we've honed in on. So sometimes if you're walking in your time out and you've got your headphones in and you're listening away to your music, you're focused on that. So you're probably not seeing those things going on around you. So you're not building your external awareness with where opportunity potentially could come in your life. So it's remembering that it's not just about what you do when you're in your workplace, if you're trying to become more aware, but it's also about what you do in your personal life will affect your workplace, and what you do in your workplace in turn can also affect your personal life. So think of them as this continual dance of this rhythm of life about where you take experience from one and you give it to the other. And it's very, very powerful when you start to see how these things overlay one on top of another. So give your mind space and opportunities will arrive, because once you learn to give your mind some space, you'll start to see them as they arrive. And when you do, it's like a light comes on and you're like, I never saw that before. And sometimes you might start to say to yourself, well, how come I can see it now? But I got the same train from the same location for 4 years going to and from the city that I live in. And so every day out of that train window, I saw something I'd never seen before. And I became quite intrigued by the fact that I discovered things. Now you might say, oh, that's really small. They're just things that you didn't notice. What's the big deal? But when you learn to notice the things you didn't notice sitting on the train, then you're sitting in a meeting, someone's having a conversation with you, and they're saying something to you, but you learn to notice their mannerisms. You learn to notice their facial expressions. You learn to notice their discomforts. And then suddenly you realize that the skill that you were applying in noticing something as simple as a building that you hadn't seen before when you were on the train on your way to work, that you're now noticing how people are reacting and responding to you. Because it's the same skill, it's just a slightly different thing that you're noticing. So you're working on practicing to develop a skill that then jumps into every part of your life, and that's where the beauty happens, especially in time out. So what's the third skill that I mentioned earlier? Well, it's knowledge. So knowledge is really, really important. We believe it's important when we go and we study at school to gain knowledge, to take us through life, to learn some of the most basic skills. But then we do it again when we want to learn knowledge at university, when we want to improve our opportunities for work, or if we're trying to seek a promotion, or we're just interested in a new topic. So seeking knowledge is really important to understand. And when we do this in different ways, just like in time out and just like with awareness, when we build this in our personal space and also in our workspace or our school space, then the building of knowledge helps us to build knowledge anywhere. So it creates that ability to work in that critical thinking space. So it can help you see where potentially, if you're working in a particular industry, that as you start to build up knowledge and awareness, you can start to see where changes potentially could apply, and they could ultimately disrupt the space that you're working in. So whether you work directly for yourself in your own workspace and you're always staying abreast of changes and things that are happening, you're building up your knowledge. In the social media space, we can easily follow so many different people to build that knowledge and that wisdom of the industry that we're working in. We can network with people and understand what's happening. We can read articles. There's an awful lot available. In fact, pretty much everything is available right at our fingertips now because of the accessibility of that knowledge. And that knowledge goes so much further than that. I mean, we now know with COVID that basically every university throughout the world is accessible to all of us. So there's portions of study, whether you just want to study a small amount or whether you want to study something much greater and get a full degree or a postgraduate degree, but you can now study anywhere because we learnt through COVID that we really needed to be more actively online. And so by being more actively online has opened up this whole world of knowledge even further. So instead, gone are the years of where you went to a university within your local environment, whether it was just within your city, or even if you had enough money that you could travel somewhere else. Well, now we know that you don't need to travel. There's people that attend universities that attend remotely from all parts of the world. So it really has opened and expanded the capacity for knowledge. And that just doesn't happen just in that space either. It's literally everywhere. So being able to expand your knowledge in all parts of your life enables you to expand your knowledge within the space that you're trying to work in. So then it potentially gives you an opportunity to see where disruption could be coming. Because it's interesting that particularly in the disruptive space that we're in now with technology, technology is disrupting our lives massively. Now, it's also enhancing our lives massively, but it's disrupting industries. And it's said that it's going to disrupt pretty much every industry that exists right now. In fact, there's a statistic which I find incredibly interesting, that more than 80% of children that enter school this year will be doing jobs that don't even exist. That is the space of disruption, right? So we can just go along blindly if we choose to and say, I'm going to do this job forever, and we can just get on that treadmill of going around day by day by day and blocking out, not taking the time to be observant, taking the time to grow knowledge or building up skills so we can see those potential opportunities or potential disruptions. We can do that, right? But if we do, it's going to be to our peril. And so frequently I hear people saying, I really didn't see that coming. That just came out of nowhere. Well, nothing really comes out of nowhere. This is the interesting thing. Even COVID-19 didn't really come out of nowhere, right? There are a specific set of circumstances that have arrived and events that occurred, and that if we are more aware of these small little incremental events that occur, then we can actually be more aware of what's coming before the big event arrives. The same thing happens in relationships. Relationships often break down, and I hear so frequently that one of the partner or the person who was being left, usually behind, says, "I just didn't see that coming." Now, there was probably lots of little incremental signs on the way that show that it's coming. So by maintaining our knowledge, taking the time out to really practice and hone those skills and be more aware in all the environments that we're within, we start to recognize and see those things as they come up. So then what's the other skills? Well, we know there's two more. Number 4 is all about planning. So it's about, if you start to see that your industry that you're working in is changing dramatically, well, you can plan to be either left behind or you can plan to be part of the change, right? It's completely up to you how you choose to work. So you can re-educate yourself, you can learn more. If you're utilizing these skills, you can go out and you can get more knowledge and wisdom, and you can maneuver your business in a different way. You can learn more, so you can actually completely change the industry that you've worked in, and not only the industry, but you can educate yourself from the ground up, and you can change completely what you do. Now, this is an interesting space because I grew up in the era where predominantly when I was younger, that if you didn't stay in a job for a long period of time, it was considered to look bad on your CV. And so I started to work in the consulting space, and I was changing jobs all the time. People were saying to me, "But why are you changing jobs so often?" And I was doing it to gain experience and to gain wisdom and to be able to stretch and move into different places. But not only have I changed the places that I've worked, but I've completely changed my careers many times throughout my life. And I strongly recommend that people do the same. If you happen to luckily, go from high school, get into university, study your dream study, it resonates completely with you, you fall into your first job and it's the perfect job for that, and it isn't disrupted too much throughout the process, and you've learnt to pivot through some of the minor changes and you stay within that career, well, that's okay, but you're never forced to do that. So if you go to university, and this happens all the time, and you get through the first year of university and it's like, this isn't for me. This just doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't feel like it's where I want to be in life. So why can't you change? Why can't you take that skill set that you've gained and change the focus? So it's pivoting can be done at university, and you just pivot and change the focus. Now, a lot of people say this is procrastinating. This is people who don't finish anything. But there's no point in finishing something that your heart's just not in, when life is short and you have the opportunity to go and chase something that your heart can really be poured into. It's just like sport. As a child, we try different sports and we try different activities until we find the ones that really interest us and excite us. So, planning is really important, and it's not just important for your career and for your education, but it's important for generally in life. So start to make some plans about how you want to pivot before the proverbial hits the fan, because that is not being aware and not using knowledge and taking time out, isn't it? That when you say, "Oh, I didn't see this coming," well, it was always coming, but you weren't aware of what was going on around you. So planning enables you to start to be more aware of these things and plan for circumstances that you can start to see that are happening. And they can include things like changing careers. When you're younger, you might decide you want to do a career that's more active. And a really common one that I see is someone starts a really physical career and they get into their 40s and they start saying, my body's really starting to break down, this is too hard for me to do this physical work. Well, you can plan and you can be aware and you can grow your knowledge and wisdom and be able to pivot out of that more physical role into something else. I mean, you can go into teaching other people the skills that you have. So you can go into the education space. There's lots of different spaces that you can go into, that you can move away from that more physical component. So just because that's where you started and what you enjoyed at the time doesn't mean you're going to enjoy it forever. So this is all part of disruption, and that's just a physical body disruption, right? Because our bodies get to a certain age and maybe they don't want to do so much of that physical work, that it becomes too difficult and too taxing on the body. So that's another form of disruption, and you can equally pivot away from those things just like you can from everything else. So whether it's large or small, disruptive or planned, there is some elements that you can do to plan, and then there are some skills that you can utilize to help you pivot quickly and move out of circumstances. But that takes that mind shift to get away and be aware. So instead of saying, oh, this is disruption, I'm really uncomfortable, we say, oh, this is disruption. Allow the feeling, I'm feeling uncomfortable, but I know there are some things that I can do that are in my power, that I can then pivot and change the way I work. Some of these pivots I can do quickly, and some are going to take time, that I have to kind of stretch them over a period of time. But the fifth skill, and I have to say, is probably, I could almost say this is single-handedly one of the most important skills I've ever learned in my life, is the skill of acceptance, okay? I can't overemphasize the word acceptance. Change and disruption, they often are, they're usually uncomfortable, and they come at times when you just don't want them to happen, right? We know that. It's like, oh, life was going along great, everything was happening just the way I liked it, why do you have to happen now? This is a common thing that we say all the time, right? We're accepting that things constantly change and systems are constantly being disrupted. This skill enables you to accept that the status quo is not going to be the status quo forever. So saying, okay, here's disruption. This is how life is. It comes along. We become disrupted because we know everything changes, and we accept a certain amount of changes in our life. Like we know that Monday becomes Tuesday and Tuesday becomes Wednesday, and we're all very comfortable with that because we wish for Friday constantly to come. But there are some things in life that we just don't accept that change. But everything changes. We grow older. We get married, we get divorced, we have relationships, they end. Every ending has another beginning. Every beginning has an ending. It's this constant cycle of change that we go through. So when we learn to become more comfortable, to break away from that status quo and that constant cycle of change, well then this skill of acceptance becomes incredibly valuable. And so when I was in the workspace where I was consulting and I was moving from place to place, there were a lot of people around me that were in jobs for 10 years. And I thought that was just amazing that somebody could stay in the same place for 10 years and that they wouldn't be bored. And I've even worked with people that have been in the same company for 40 years. And I find this incredible. But this is rare now. It's rare that a company will exist for 40 years unless they're a highly driven technology company and they've learned to change, pivot, and go with disruption. There was a time when, which is a really well-known organisation in Australia, which was Blockbuster Video, that they were on every corner. And when I was a child, you went to the corner shop and you hired a video. Now, those places don't exist, but that was a massive company, and they were given the opportunity to undertake a large potential internal change to pivot, and they decided that wasn't for them, that it wasn't going to be a problem. Now that business doesn't exist anymore. We don't go to corner shops and get videos. It just doesn't happen in the Western world, where everything's online. And we laughed at some of the content that was available online, said, oh, this is ridiculous. No one's going to watch it. No one's going to listen. And yet people are watching and people are listening. So this is disruption showing up, but we don't accept it. So often the opportunity becomes available and we say, oh, that's never going to last. It's just a fad. And that's our way of not accepting that change is always coming, and we need to be prepared to pivot all the time. So those 5 incredible skills: acceptance, planning, knowledge, time out, and awareness. If you work on those 5 skills in your life, disruption will seem completely different. You'll see opportunity when it knocks, instead of wishing later that you had. So those skills are about becoming more present to the current moment, because whatever you're trying to plan for in the future, whatever life that you want ahead, whatever career you want after you study, whatever you want after you finish paying for your car, whatever you want after you buy that house, all of those things require you to accept where you're at and plan for the future. So acceptance is about where you are right now, and the only place you can plan for the future is where you are right now. So these 5 skills really help you to tune in to where you are, know the things that you can control, and understand that disruption and those opportunities that knock in the most unlikely places are opportunities that you could very much take control of and really drive that life that you want to achieve moving forward. So I hope today that you've enjoyed this topic, talking around disruption and around opportunity, because it's a topic that isn't going away fast, and it's not going away at any time soon. So the sooner we all tap into this space and start to really build solid skills around it, the better off we're all going to be. So next time, when you see something that you think suddenly turned up into your space and you didn't see it coming, do some reflection and look back and start to pick back at the things before, and you might say, hang on a minute, there were things that were showing up, but maybe I didn't want to hear them, maybe I didn't want to see them, maybe I was uncomfortable and I didn't want to change my life. And then start to think about how you can engage those things in your life as you move forward, and then you can become much more comfortable with disruption and much more comfortable with change. And I suppose a nice way to finish is something that a saying that I like to use: you can learn to become comfortably uncomfortable. And I do this in my everyday, and so too can you. So thanks for joining me today on the art of mindful disruption, where I get you to think outside your space, change your perception a little bit, rise those emotions that could dig things up, and potentially that could take you forward, so you can uncover that limitless potential that exists within us all to create a better life for you. And in doing that, you not only create a better life for you, but you get to create a better life for all the people around you by being a positive influence in their space, just as you are in your own. If you'd like to learn more, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, which you're listening to this on now, which is The Art of Mindful Disruption. Or if you like to read, you're welcome to follow my blog, which is exactly the same name, The Art of Mindful Disruption. I'm Jeanette Peterson, mindfulness coach and writer, and it's been lovely to share this meandering mindfulness session with you today.